Back in March of 2017, Bitcoin's price rallied up to the previous all-time high of 2013. Here it actually consolidated a fair few times. Back in January of 2017, getting rejected from this area, up into March of 2017 to get rejected once again, after which we saw a fantastic parabolic run to the upside up towards the December 2017 high. Since then, we did see obviously a bit of a move to the downside and then a resurgence into the next bullish market. We can see here that Bitcoin's price rallied up into July of 2019. We found it consolidating again in this range of August 2020 until we got a breakthrough event where we then tested the previous all-time high of 2017. This was back in November of 2020. Here we consolidated for a few weeks before rallying up into new all-time highs. I speak about this today, guys, because we are in very similar territory when it comes to Bitcoin. We can see that we've been testing and consolidating on the previous all-time high range. And if history does tend to repeat itself, then we are likely to see the next parabolic phase for BTC. Guys, let's roll that intro and get right down into today's Bitcoin analysis. Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Welcome back to another Bitcoin video update. And today we are taking a look at the Bitcoin analysis on a macro scale. We're taking a look at the weekly time frame and we're basically taking a look at the historical price movements and drawing conclusions as to whether or not history is going to repeat itself. We see the same things over and over again. And although we do have fundamentally different times, we can argue that the sentiment is very much the same. If we go back to where I started today's video, which was over here in the 2013 highs and 2017 breakthroughs, we can see that price action has a tendency to want to find resistance at previous peaks and find support at these areas as well. Let's just take a look at a couple of key points here at these very early stages for Bitcoin. This is going to help us understand where we currently are and what potentially might happen next for BTC. So as we can kind of see down in this range, when we started to go down into the bear market of 2014, we did see price kind of coming up and consolidating into the range between $378 and $502 for Bitcoin. You can see that we got rejected here initially in November of 2014, and then we started to rally back up back into November of 2015, and 1 year later, do we see that this is an area of basically resistance, right? The previous support turned to resistance. But not only was it resistance, it's an area that we started to chew our way through some of those sell orders in this consolidation. This is known as a continuation pattern, and what happens after a continuation pattern is you continue whatever led into it. You've probably heard me talk about this before. And in the case of Bitcoin here, we can see that we had a move to the upside. We have the continuation pattern going sideways, and then we have this next break to the upside, right? And it's really important to understand about these things is this is basically a very early indicator of the bullish market, how we are able to break through these resistances. Now, not only did we break through back in 2016 here, we also back tested and found it as support. So what was resistance turned to support before we rallied up to the new all-time highs where we consolidated once again and then started to run to the upside. Now, obviously back in 2013, 14, 15, and 16, we obviously had very different economic times. So not only do we see Bitcoin being sufficiently less supply, and obviously significantly lower demand and lower prices, we can see that it didn't take a lot of money to move the needle, right? And so we did see a really good run up into 2017, right? Blew people's minds with how high this thing ran. But here we can see that we had the bear market of 2018 and we had that initial surge to the upside. In the same way that we saw with the initial surge here in 2015, we had the July of 2019 surge. Here we found resistance, we lost it, we came down in a nice healthy correction and then started to move on up. Now, obviously, that correction was enhanced by the pandemic and everything that happened in 2020, but we did find ourselves finding resistances and breakthroughs in this area. And we did eventually break through in, I think it was November of 2020 here, where we broke through it and we tested out the previous all-time high just up here in November of 2020 going into December of 2020. We didn't really consolidate terribly too much here. It was about a 3-week period before we broke out and we had that next major run to the upside into the $65,000 high. We corrected down during a few different kind of scenarios. I think we had Celsius and Lunar and stuff like that was all occurring. But we did also see this next kind of peak up to $69,000 before we got into that bearish market. Here you can see that we have this area of resistance, this double area, double top, right? This was an area where we were finding a lot of selling pressure, and that's why we saw that bearish market really come in. It was obviously enhanced by everything that was going on with Celsius, Voyager, Luna. Obviously, we saw FTX later in 2022, right? So we know that there was a lot of fundamental reasons why we saw these moves to the downside, but also we can see from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of reasons why traders were also coming out of their positions. Now, on this move to the downside, we obviously saw the bear market low coming in at just over $15,000. And basically, as we started to come out of this in 2013, we tested this area of resistance that we had formed back in May of 2022. Okay, this area, again, coming in around that $30,000 to $32,000 was an area that I was expecting to hold up a lot more than it actually did. The ETF news did actually fuel another breakout situation that we saw in October of 2023. This obviously, this area of rejection did actually create lots of new bear market low points for altcoins. So we did see some fantastic opportunities for altcoins, but not so much in the way of BTC. It held up incredibly well. This breakout obviously saw this next run to the upside where we find ourselves into this consolidation phase that we're at the moment, testing out the previous all-time highs and basically finding and chewing through all those sell orders. Now, I'm bringing this up today because we've seen this twice before, right? We've seen these consolidation phases, they breakthroughs up to the all-time highs, consolidation, massive bullish market, right? We saw this again over in 2020 where we had that initial surge to the upside. We saw the consolidation. Again, if I pull this across here, you can see the previous resistance, here, consolidation breakthrough to the all-time high, consolidation breakthrough. Okay, now we're out here where we have the initial phases, and you can kind of see these. There's a couple of them. I'm going to draw the next one in here for you to see as well. And make this a little bit broader so you can kind of see this previous area of resistance. We have the consolidation and the breakthrough up to the all-time high where we find consolidation. Now, if history does repeat itself, and I'll zoom out of this and you guys can see everything on the screen here. If this does tend to repeat itself, if this does repeat itself like it tends to do so, then our next run is going to be absolutely crazy. Now, obviously, when it comes to my price predictions for Bitcoin, I'm a lot more conservative. If history repeats itself and we see these next kind of big legs to the upside, we could be talking about some pretty significant returns for Bitcoin that maybe even make my previous conservative targets look like an absolute joke. So I can't rule out the idea of a $300,000-$400,000 Bitcoin, at least not yet. But my conservative targets are basically $110,000 to $120,000, and it will be obviously a fantastic place for Bitcoin. But if we start to exceed those targets, then we should be thinking about the next kind of major moves when it comes to Bitcoin and significantly higher prices, in my opinion. We have to consider, though, when it comes to Bitcoin, that there are lots of reasons why we might not hit 400, 500,000 in this next surge to the upside. There's a lot of things we have to kind of consider. The ETFs have been great so far, but as an Ethereum spot ETF launches, are we going to actually see money rolling out of the Bitcoin spot ETFs into the Ethereum spot ETFs, and therefore we're actually going to have just this kind of little move here into new all-time highs before we start to get into that next bearish market, right? For Bitcoin, we might start to see an actual altcoin season, which we haven't seen since 2017. It will be very interesting if that is the case. But for the most part, if we are to just look at the data inside the price action, then we are going to be looking for a pretty phenomenal run for Bitcoin. If we take the previous breakout situation, for example, we did see a 289% move approximately. If we see something similar, that's going to put us at about $250,000, about $270,000. If, of course, we take the previous ones, which we did see here about 1,300, if we do see diminishing gains, and that's why I feel that we probably are going to see, a little bit less, we might be able to breach up to 150,000, sorry, which would be about 100%. And you would see this diminishing gains that we've had over time, right? We go from 1,300 to 270 to about 100 and maybe, 50 or something like that. We might see some pretty phenomenal numbers for Bitcoin, but I don't think they're going to be the 500,000 scenario that I know so many people are kind of talking about at the moment for BTC. You can let me know what your thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below, though. Do you think that we're going to see, $300,000-$400,000 Bitcoin, or do you think we're actually going to see a more conservative run to the upside? Do you agree that we're likely to see this consolidation phase finish over the next few weeks and a next run to the upside? I'm really interested to canvass your thoughts and opinions. Smash the like button, guys, if you have found today's video useful and informative. If you're new, subscribe, and why don't you check out this video right here where we're discussing a little bit about what's going on in the crypto space.